to be online with you. It's just a session all about sort of what tips and things to update you at the moment in terms of supporting you in your teaching assistant roles that you have in the school that you're working in. I've got sort of three kind of key aims of this session. And at the end of it, really happy to sort of take questions as well. If there's anything else that you want to discuss or want me to consider sort of thinking about for a future session, perhaps in the summer term, if that would be helpful for colleagues. So what I'm going to do is just provide a really brief update on the current sort of curriculum and teaching priorities that are happening across primary education at the moment. I'm expecting that many of you will be really familiar with these. You may have heard about them either through briefings through YCAT, if you're part of YCAT, but we have got other HART members on today, and it may be that you haven't quite been given some of the updates that we've been given and key messages across the trust. So some things you hear today may be new, but I doubt they will be. The second thing I want to share about is really to share some sort of practical, and I've called them sort of things that you could use tomorrow strategies that would strengthen children's recall of key knowledge and help them to develop strong learning habits without really adding to any of your workload, because just like any member of staff that's working in a school, I recognise how incredibly busy you all are, alongside the teaching staff, alongside any other support staff that are working in schools, whether that be in the offices or the kitchen. We're all kind of stretched and at full capacity, and I really acknowledge that. So hopefully the kind of the things that we talk about will be things that will just help you all, things that you can remember. And all of it is recorded in the notebook that I've shared, and hopefully you've had a copy of that. And if you haven't got a copy of that yet, that will make its way to you, hopefully, in a timely manner. And then finally, if we get time, we're just going to revisit the Shrek approach. I'll talk more about that towards the end of the session, and just reflect on how that can shape our interactions with pupils across all stages of primary curriculum. It's really highlighted still, very much around the early years, but I think there's an incredible amount from that we can all learn. I know myself, even in the work that I do, I found it incredibly useful in terms of helping me interact more effectively with children in all classrooms in primary schools. So let's think about the updates. As I say, I'm hoping that much of this feels really relevant, but we've had some key sort of changes in guidance, key sort of things happening in terms of Ofsted as well. So there are some new kind of priorities, but they kind of build on what we've been doing for a long time. So let's just really remind ourselves of those, or refresh our memories of them. The first one, which is seen very much across all of the Ofsted remit, very much a strong DFE focus, is strong foundations, and ensuring that all children in primary schools have strong foundations in key aspects of their learning is essential. If we're going to get this right, the strong foundations means that we need to ensure that we've got consistent, accurate routines across classrooms. So that's very much from how we welcome children into school in the morning, how we establish those routines for them so that they are able to belong and thrive in our classroom settings, without things changing too much. They know what's going to happen on a day-to-day basis. And we know that for very young children, particularly our vulnerable children as well, routine is essential. Children will thrive in structure, and it provides them very much with a framework for knowing how they're going to navigate their day. And once they know that, they feel secure, they feel safe. So we will then get the very best out of them in their time that they have in school, when they feel that calmness and that settledness. It's also very much around the teaching that we do, and thinking about stripping right back to essentials and making sure that we do these well and that we embed these foundations really strongly. So over the years, we've perhaps missed some of this work, and the research that Ofsted and the DFE are very much sort of building their changes on very much indicates that getting these strong foundations is essential. So spending more time thinking about correct pencil grip, handwriting habits, letter formation. Alongside that, this is the precision in use of phonics and maths vocabulary. And as part of that, we need to be making sure that our modelling and the prompts that we use help to build children's independence and success in all of these key areas of learning for children. Now, fluency and recall of essential knowledge has been something that we've talked about for a long time, around the research that we focused on in the previous Ofsted framework, which was very much part of the curriculum development that very much focused on. So that was building on the cognitive science. We at HART focus very much on the work of Daniel Willingham as a really key sort of educational psychologist and researcher. And through his work, we've really learned a lot about how important it is that we build recall and retrieval practice into lessons, into our interactions with children, because by doing that, we're strengthening their ability to retain this information in their long-term memory. So very much linked with practice. Practice makes permanent, making sure that children get those opportunities to rummage around and we give them time to be able to rummage around in their brains and remember what they've learned, and also build on that learning. So making them think about what they've learned in the past, that prior learning, and then building on that so that that new knowledge will stick. So we can see here 3 sort of pertinent bullet points. You know, that's all about quick, accurate recall, supporting that long-term learning, frequent, short retrieval practice, helping that knowledge to stick. And what is particularly crucial in this third part is that your role in that as teaching assistants, you really do play a crucial role in strengthening that fluency during lessons and routines, because you are very much a key part of being the eyes and ears of what goes on in the classrooms. When the teacher is perhaps leading the whole class learning, you are the people who spot kind of the children who are perhaps not engaging as well, or the children who perhaps look overwhelmed by what's happening and maybe just need a little bit of reassurance. So that your ability to sort of really strengthen what's happening and support children with their fluency is absolutely key. A big shift, which I know that everybody will be aware about, is around inclusion. And we see this now in the new Ofsted schedule having its own judgment area. That's a really big change. And the white paper that you may have heard a little bit about through the national news that came out, the government sort of white paper that came out on Monday, you know, has this greater focus on SEND pupils. We knew it was coming. The changes to how SEND is resourced across the education sector is really in, you know, big discussion at the moment, and the government have got new plans which they're sharing and new expectations around that. There's still a lot to learn about what that's going to look like in practice, but at the moment what we do know is that Ofsted have already moved to this stronger focus on inclusion and having the very highest expectations for every child, notably our disadvantaged children who continue to underperform compared to their peers. And we know that right from the work that happens in early years, even from an early years point of view, the indicators say that when the disadvantaged children are behind their peers in the early years, that has a significant indication about their ability to get any sort of GCSEs and to get the more positive grades in those GCSEs, so that later learning is really affected if they don't get that very best start in life. So inclusion and high expectations for every child, and you can see there just some of the things that key bullet points. So ensuring that all pupils can access their learning. And I'm sure you're party to lots of conversations around adaptations and making sure that learning is, you know, sufficiently scaffolded, or additional adaptations are in place linked with maybe with an individual education plan or a pupil overview profile, the POPs that we use in some of the YCAT schools. Ensuring that those whatever's in place is calmly, it's put in place, it's clear, it's supportive, so that those scaffolds are well known to children, whether that be word mats, other sort of closed procedure activities, etc., that all of those enable the children to feel that success. One of the things that we're going to pick up on today as well, though, is avoiding the overhelping and encouraging independence. And increasingly, I know that many of our support staff, our teaching assistants in our schools are needed to support our children with the highest needs. And that could be children on the SEND register, or children who are in receipt of interventions, or well-being, health and well-being time, etc. And I think one of the things that we need to be very conscious about that in our work is that part of our responsibility is to encourage independence. So what we don't want to be seen as our Velcro adults that sit alongside those children all the time and help them navigate through their time in the classroom or on the playground, without thinking about what is the journey to enabling that child to be more independent in those situations. So we're really going to focus on thinking about avoiding overhelping, encouraging independence later on in the session. And I mentioned the Shrek approach. So at all stages, the interactions that adults have with children are key. So many children these days we have concerns with lower starting points around children's communication and interaction, their knowledge of language, notably for our disadvantaged children who we know already start school with a deficit of language and access to vocabulary that other children may have had. So we play a crucial role in ensuring that we surround children with the very highest quality of interactions and the use of vocabulary, so that we see that as part of our role, expanding their knowledge, supporting them to understand a wider range of vocabulary across a wide breadth of curriculum areas. Looking at 4 that builds on that consistent language and predictable routine. So making sure that through those routines that I mentioned earlier, that we reduce pupils' confusion, that they feel that safety and that security. They know what key vocabulary means, that's used regularly around them, that we do that checking in with them, checking that they're sure what we're meaning. One example of that today is I talked about it when we had our training day on Monday. It was something as simple as thinking around when we're talking about handwriting paper, for example, that has the specific lines on it that help to guide children to write their letters correctly. And I've always talked about making sure that children write between the tram lines. We can make an assumption with vocabulary that children will know what we mean by something like the tram lines. There used to be, trams were notable with train tracks, etc., when I was young. But actually, do children know what a tram is? Are we making an assumption? So we need to make sure that we double check some of the things that we say and think, will a child know what that means? If we say an expanded noun phrase and we say you need to expand that sentence, do they know what the word expand means? So always just thinking about, do we need to explain or double check? Because I know what that word means, but will they know what it means? Because if they don't, it's going to, potentially lead them to feeling confused, etc. So we, as teaching assistants, reinforcing the same prompts, thinking carefully about the language and knowing what's coming up through that close work with the other staff, the teachers that we're working with, so that we're all on the same page in terms of reinforcing the same vocabulary. We're clear on what vocabulary is expected to be developed, what language, what structure we use, for example, to explain the column addition method, so that we are in line with the school policies. So we're keeping our language consistent, so that then supports the children in being confident, and the methods, the strategies, the approaches that we're teaching them will then be more embedded in their memory through immersing them in lots of predictable language and routine. And then finally, I've touched on this, but what we know very much is happening in education is there's a lot of evidence-informed practice that's been and research that we're drawing on at this time. And I think because we're drawing on that research, that gives it more credibility. It really does indicate to us that these changes are positive changes. These changes are really going to have an impact on children's outcomes, on their confidence, and on building them into independent learners. So the evidence-informed practice that we're drawing from is a lot of research that Ofsted have done around strong foundations, as well as the best start in life, which was the big piece of research that was happened last year with regards to early years. And within that, we know that focus on accuracy, modelling and routines, is threaded through that research like golden threads. In addition to that, the government, through the DFE, have done significant updates in terms of producing the writing and the reading frameworks. So again, based on research, but with a lot of recommendations in there as to how schools should change their practice. And within there, both in reading and writing, we hear a lot about precision. Teachers having much more precision in what exactly it is they're teaching. And that should be really clear for all of you working in the classrooms. So you should know exactly what it is that we are teaching the children today and what outcome we are expecting, because then that enables us to be able to support, as the support staff alongside the children in the classroom, the careful practice of the right things. And within all of this, there's the group called the EEF, the Education Endowment Foundation, which is a charity and is a lot of investment in the work that they do. And they have supported behind all of this research, other actual evidence-informed research tasks, which really identified that to be successful, children need their work broken down into small steps. We need to ensure that we reduce the cognitive load and that we provide clarity and scaffolding as necessary so that all children can access the learning. So there's quite a lot there, but there's some key themes which I hope that little update just feels familiar, but it just pulls everything together of really what we're aiming for, what's being shared with us, what's expected from us all that are working in primary schools at the moment. So in terms of getting that right, you as our teaching assistants play such a vital role in shaping children's success, in achieving those strong foundations, because you are the adults who work most closely with pupils every day. The habits that you have with them, the prompts, the language that you use really does have probably, the significant, powerful impact on their ability to be fluent, confident, and independent. I often if we reflect those relationships that you build as teaching assistants are more personal, they're closer, as that said, than often than the class teacher is, and you see things, you probably see things more as well than many of the teachers do. The teachers obviously take the books in, but they're managing the whole room, whereas you will be working more closely with individuals or with a group. So you have the ability to really, make those changes in the moment. And it's what you say and it's how you prompt, as it says on there, that will have that powerful impact. So today we're really going to pick up on that, and we're going to think about what that slide earlier said, which was around spotting, that prompting, the things that you say. The research talks to us very much about high quality interactions. And I just thought it would be really important for us to think about this, because this is the things that we do on a day-to-day, things that you can maybe change and reflect on and think about that could have an impact on you, really making really supporting that effectiveness in terms of your interactions and the outcomes that you get with children when you're working with them in the classroom. So spot the helpful prompt. So on this slide, what I've got in front of us is there's 6 things at the bottom that we might say. And if any of you have ever watched Antiques Roadshow, it's something I actually really like, watching Antiques Roadshow. And Fiona Bruce on Antiques Roadshow plays a game called Basic, Better, Best. And that's where they compare antiques as to which looks to be the most basic, not worth as much, to the antique that's worth the most. And I quite like that analogy. And we're going to kind of use that analogy in terms of thinking about prompts and things that we might say in the moment to children when we're working with them. But instead of it being basic, better, best, we're going to think about something we might say that's not helpful, that's not really going to have an impact, has that very low impact, and perhaps maybe even has negative. It's not helpful, it's not an ideal thing to say. Then think about what we might say which is okay. It could move the children's learning on, depending upon which child we're working with. This doesn't particularly have a negative connotation, but then thinking about what is it that we need to include in our interactions that make them stronger. So I'm just going to give you a moment just to read those things that we might find ourselves saying underneath at the bottom of this table, and then we're going to move them around and pop them into the boxes. So just take a moment to read them through. Okay, so hopefully you've just had a quick read through those. Let's have a little move around of them then. Hopefully I can move them around whilst they're on the screen. Or no, it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to. But so let's look at the first one. Hold your pencil properly. I don't know whether anybody wants to unmute themselves or is able just to type into the chat, but hold your pencil properly. Helpful, not helpful, okay, or strong? What do we think? Anybody want to unmute themselves and say? Might be difficult if we're in groups. Ah, brilliant. I think that looks like Teresa. You wave? No? Oh, no. Anybody? So we've got a not helpful there. Thanks, Joanne. Brilliant. So it's not helpful. Hold your pencil properly. One of the things that I always think is that if we have to come from a place of thinking when we're working alongside children that typically children don't choose to do things incorrectly on purpose. That when we spot these things, whether they're spelling something incorrectly, whether they're holding their pencil incorrectly, it isn't because they're wanting to sort of do that on purpose to annoy us or to not follow the instruction. It generally indicates, doesn't it, that they don't get it, that they maybe haven't been taught to, or even though we might think we've taught them to do it, that they're finding it difficult to do that. So always come from a place of they're not choosing to do that on purpose. So definitely, yeah, hold your pencil properly is not helpful. Okay, let's look at the one below that. So let's break down the word and tap each sound together. So presuming here that it's part of reading. So if we get, let's break down the word and tap each sound together, do we think that that's not helpful, okay, or strong? Anybody want to help with that one? So it's come through from Jack. So we think that that one's strong. Lois is saying strong. Darlie says strong. Great. Definitely that one. Yep, that one is really helpful. That's a strong response. So let's break down the word and tap each sound together. And it's strong because it indicates that you are supporting the strategy that the school has shared. So let's break down the word and tap it to each sound together must run alongside how the phonics is implemented in that school. Brilliant. Next one, show me your froggy fingers. Are they sitting on the pencil? So do we think that's strong, okay, or not helpful? Okay, so we've got some okays coming in. Yeah, a few okays coming in. So I think I differ with this one. I think this one's quite strong. And the reason why I'd say this is strong, because just like the break down the word and tap each sound together, it's indicating that the teaching assistant is getting the child to reshape its thinking, to stop, and is supporting them to think about what they've been taught to do, or the school's strategy for supporting them to hold the pencil. So show me your froggy fingers. So if the child perhaps say mustn't be holding its pencil correctly, it's then being told to show the froggy fingers and then how to sit them on the pencil. So it feels like it fits with what has been taught. And there's a really good thing there. What if it's not? What if they don't know what froggy fingers are? I would assume if it's being used that they do know what they are, but it's a really valid point. So if you're in a classroom where children were able to then show the froggy fingers, then and it seemed to be part of the school's approach to handwriting, then it would be a good response. But yeah, okay, I'll go with okay if that's the teaching assistant making it up. So it's a good point, that, isn't it, that it's important that we always think about making sure we replicate the approaches and strategies that are being shared. So check your pencil grip. What do we think to that one? Yeah, we've got some okays coming in, definitely. So this one's okay, isn't it? It's a good prompt reminder. The teaching assistant is being supported because they have spotted something, and with the strong directions, strong foundations, what's really important is that we don't walk by and we don't ignore something. If we see it, we need to do something about it. So check your pencil grip. Yeah, is definitely an okay one. If the school was using something like froggy fingers or was using nip flip grip, for example, it might be, pop your pencil down, think about nip flip grip, pick your pencil back up again, show me that your pencil grip is correct. So that would strengthen that response. So we've got two others here linking with reading. So we've got sound it out, and we've got it's train, say train. So two there. Let's think about sound it out. What do we think about sound it out? Okay, not helpful or strong? Yeah, we've got people coming through with okay. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It gives some encouragement around strategies. Sound it out, an approach. It's okay. It's not. It's better than the one that's not helpful. But it's certainly not as strong as let's break down the word and tap each sound together. So the final one there, I think I've given it away really. It's train. Say train. What do we think that one is? Yeah, it's not helpful. We've all had those frustrating moments when we might feel like that's what we want to say, but it's not going to help the child learn. And it definitely, if they're not saying train correctly, they don't know how to do it. So we need to give them the mechanism, the support, the scaffold around it. So let's just have a look at some of those things. And I've included this in your notebook. So why those things are not helpful, why they're okay, and why they might be the better one. So So it's just thinking about, you know, if you're saying straight away that something's wrong, we've got to be really careful that we don't judge the children. We may then raise some anxiety. With those not helpful ones are not giving any next steps. They stop the child thinking as well, and you're not in that moment going to help them learn what they need to do to change and to be more effective. The okay ones do signal effort and they do sort of give direction, but as this highlights, they still remain a little bit too vague. And so with that, they're a little bit limiting because it doesn't perhaps give the child that really clear direction they need. So they might still be guessing at how to improve. And then if we look at the best one, we are actually, what we're doing there is we're giving the child really good specific actions that they need to do to focus on to help to support them to make that change. And you can see there just listed why things are most effective. So they're teaching the strategy, which then builds that independence, reduces the cognitive load because you're pulling their attention right down to the actual steps that they need to do. It uses precise language that repeats the language that's been used across the classroom. And it also keeps children thinking, which helps to strengthen their memory and fluency. So you're giving them that deliberate practice, more thinking time about the right thing. And one of the key expressions that we need to be thinking about is practice makes permanent. If we get them practicing the right things, we will make that permanent. If we leave them practicing the wrong things, that will also embed and become permanent. So we play an absolute crucial role in spotting all of those things. Okay, activity there that I'm going to leave you with is just, you know, some more examples of that. Each row here has a not helpful and okay and a strong, but in some rows they may have been muddled up. The first row is all about handwriting. The second row is all about when we might be writing. The third row is all about reading. The fourth one is all about how we might be sitting at the desks. And the last one is all about math. So just another sort of opportunity for you just to really sort of think about that language and how we can expand what we say to make sure that what we're saying is more effective. And at the end of the notebook, I've given you lots more examples of those as well, just to support further thinking around that, because I hope that activity has shown you, just maybe helped us to sort of think about how we might just reflect a little bit more on what we say before we say it, so that we can ensure that the prompts that we give are as effective as they possibly can be. In your notebook, I've also given you the opportunity to think about sort of rewriting some of these, and there's some examples here on the screen at the moment. So just give you a little bit of time just to read those through and how we might rewrite them to say something that's more effective. So I'll just let you read those through. Because as I said before, sometimes we can, you know, we kind of need, it's easy to say some of these things without thinking about the impact that they might have. So let's look at them then. I'm looking at keeping my eye on the time and just wanting to make sure we get through everything. So the first one, you've already forgotten what we did 5 minutes ago. So thinking about how we might rewrite that could just be encouraging the child to think, let's think about what did we do 5 minutes ago? Can you remember? Let's talk about it, so that you kind of get them to pull back and draw on, start again with their thinking, and encourage them to think about what was already said. We've done these times tables hundreds of times. Why can't you remember them? So with that one, we're going back to really sort of thinking about, let's think about what can you remember? So it's the tone that we use, it's that encouragement to get them thinking, to try to be independent and to break it down into small steps. I can't read that. Your writing is a mess. So with this one, we want to perhaps just pick out something and think of something that they could have done better. So I can see here that you've not got your curly K's joining very well, and or your joins. Let's have a go at some of those letters again, see whether we can get them a little bit clearer. No, that's not the word. Look properly. So again, just thinking about how we take that negative away, and we think about if we can encourage some spelling patterns, if this is about spelling or if this is about reading, so breaking things down, thinking about the phonics and the strategies that we'd be applying from the class that are being taught in the classroom. So alongside that, there's loads of different times when there's general things that are happening as part of those routines. So handwriting and pencil grip happens regularly, fluency and recall around the English and the maths. And there's just some other prompts here that I've just shared on the screen, things that you might use as you're walking around the room to help you to be able to give the children this guidance around the strong foundations and the words and phrases that you might sort of think about saying to encourage that moving towards independence. I'll just let you have a read of all of those. And what I find just captured at the bottom there is that these prompts directly strengthen fluency and recall without taking over the child's thinking. So you're not doing it for them. Okay, so it's really key to remember then that learning sticks with children when we get them to retrieve the information often, we go back to that prior learning, we get them to think about the small steps that they know, and build on that. When we use that consistent language and routines, we make reference to things that we know, the taught strategies that have been used in class. When we get them to do practice and that's short, that's frequent, and that's accurate. So the handwriting practice, we don't walk by and see incorrect letters being formed. We don't walk by and see an incorrect pencil grip. We make sure that we help them to be accurate. And when we're working maybe in one-to-one situations, if something's taking a little bit of time to click, then we make sure that we create little opportunity for more practice of something in those sessions ourselves and feel confident that that is the right thing to be doing. And adults help, finally, children to become independent and not reliant on them. So by doing all of 1, 2, 3, you'll help the child to be that independent learner that we want them to be. So a few questions here that have come in recently to me from teaching assistants when I've been having conversations with them around strong foundations, and there may be sort of things that are kind of your thinking as well whilst you listen to this session. And I've just got 4 of these. So the first one here is, how do I know when I'm over helping? Because I know when we're sitting alongside children or we are required to work with a group, it's very easy for us to feel that if the children are not successful, then that might be reflective of our input or how we've worked with them, or that it's the adult that hasn't been as successful or as effective. So sometimes I know that we can default into maybe over scaffolding or over prompting, or writing the sentence for them and getting them just to copy it, for example. So that would all be classed as over helping because we're trying to develop that independence. So how do I know when I am over helping? Let's have a look at some things that might help us. So when you are over helping, when you're doing more thinking than the child, and that's one thing that when I get when I have the position, the lucky position to be able to be going into lots of classrooms, that's what I'm looking at is, are the teaching assistants working harder than the child? Is the teacher working harder than the child? So, make sure that, you consider that they need to be working hard. So it's thinking about how you break it down so that they can access it. So if the child waits for you before they have a try, then that is known as learned helplessness. So we need to think about that. And that's something that I would encourage you to sort of, if you find yourself in that position, then it's about, talking to the teacher in the classroom about, that you think that they have got that learned helplessness and they're not really, and how can you be supported to make some changes. So you give clues that the child hasn't earned. So you might point to answers or tell them what to write. when you remove your help removes the challenge instead of supporting it, and you possibly stay next to the child longer than needed, preventing independence. And we can feel, as I say, that we need to stay next to the child, but working out how you get them, set them off, and then perhaps just move over to talk to another child or go and do a little bit of other support, whilst keeping your antennae out so that you know when to go back to the child that you're working with at the right time, so that you're not there too much, and you're giving them that opportunity to be independent. So underneath that, there's some ideas about what to do instead. So I'll just let you have a little read of those prompts. I think that one at the bottom there is useful. So the I do, we do, you do. So you can model something together. You could scaffold a sentence. You could orally rehearse a sentence. And then when you know that the child is in a position that has the sort of the key elements of that sentence, is able to sort of spell them, then you leave them to you do. And at that point, you take your sort of support away for a moment and let them try to be independent and see what they can do. So if your support means the child stops thinking, then that's the key idea. It's too much. So here's another question. What should I do when children forget routines? So how do you support them if they forget those general routines? So again, keep it calm, consistent, and predictable is so important. So reteach, don't reprimand. Routines need hundreds of repetitions. Use exactly the same language every time. Model the expectation briefly. Watch me. Now you try. Praise the reset. Great, you're back into the routine. And if the whole table or class is forgotten, then probably everybody needs reteaching, not just the child. And in those moments, what we need to avoid are long explanations that are overload for children, that we go into sort of telling off mode. We know when we need to tell off and when we don't. Change the routine avoid changing the routine each time. So we stick to the routine, go back, get them to explain what they know of the routine so we can unpick any gaps that they might have forgotten, etc. So the key idea here is that we need to think that routines aren't forgotten because of defiance. We know the children, you'll know when maybe there is an element of defiance, and that may be a different issue. But overall, what we'd say typically is if routines are forgotten, then it's probably not defiance. It's probably because the children need more practice at it. And when we're talking about routines, we don't just mean in terms of like the classroom management, the moving around, routines in handwriting, routines in setting out the date and the title effectively. It may be that they haven't been picked up on in the marking and feedback from the class teacher. Things haven't been embedded and reinforced recently. So that routine could have become forgotten. So how do I support a child who avoids writing? Often a really difficult moment. That you're writing a story or the rest of the class are writing a story, and you may be required to be sitting supporting a small group, and they may be struggling to get going with that. So let's just have a little look at that. So we might want to remove the barriers is the main thing for us to think about, and not the expectations that are around that. And we might want to start off and think about what is it with the writing? Is it the basic mechanics of the writing? Often many children do avoid writing because it feels effortful. So thinking about what we can do to support that, so they're sitting properly, and help them to warm up, make that bit fun. Perhaps do a little bit of revision, extra practice. There's some nice things there in terms of warming up fingers, air writing, etc. Using oral rehearsal is really powerful. So working with the children to say the sentence before you write it, supporting them maybe with dictated sentences that that they can write that alongside their phonic ability. Reduce the quantity but insist on accuracy, so one brilliant sentence at a time. And give those little micro successes, so little aspects of it. So expect them to write the first 2 words and then you'll check in with them. So breaking it down into a smaller step, and then also giving those clues. So there's some key things there to avoid. So letting them avoid writing altogether, doing the writing for them. So not feeling tempted to write things on the whiteboards, so that, they just copyright. You may support them with thinking about spelling on a whiteboard, but trying not to sort of just write the sentence for them to then copy. So building it with them in a couple of words at a time, as opposed to doing that, and really not lowering those expectations for them. So we know children avoid writing when it feels too hard, and our job is to make those steps smaller, not the expectations lower, but the steps smaller, and to support them by breaking it down. And the final question, conscious of time. So what is the best way to prompt recall without giving answers? We can feel really tempted to help them, particularly because we build such strong relationships and we want them to feel success. But if we tell them the answers, it's not going to embed. So how do we do it without telling the answers? So let's have a look at some examples of that. So giving clues, but not the answer. And there's some examples of phrases that we might say there. We want them to retrieve the knowledge themselves. We want them to do that rummaging around in their memories and see what they can remember. We might narrow the focus. So we might say, just look at the first part of it. What do you notice? We might break it into smaller steps. We might use retrieval routines. So tell me before you show me, using fingers or objects to help their memory. And we might ask the child to explain their thinking. We might get them to tell them it in the way that they remember. So teach it to me. How did it work? How did you work it out? So what we want to avoid is telling them the answer, giving too many clues. So just maybe one couple of clues, and answering too quickly. So giving them thinking time. Let there be a pause. Let them have to rummage. Don't think you have to fill that gap. So giving them time is okay. And then it might be that you say, a bit like the phone a friend, a bit like the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, do you want me to give you a clue? And trying to build that up, that they're trying to do that rummaging and trying to remember before we give any answers too quickly. So key idea here is if the child recalls it themselves, the memory strengthens. And if we say it for them, it doesn't stick. So we've always got to be really, really mindful of that. Okay, at this point I wanted to just to go on to the Shrek approach. As I said, we need to stop because we've just run out of time. I'm going to leave you to think about this. And I've just left on there that Shrek, as I said before, isn't just for early years. It's a really simple, powerful way of improving language, thinking, and independence for children of all ages. And as I said at the beginning, we know that, particularly for our disadvantaged children, that their exposure to new vocabulary can be limited, and we really play that crucial role in doing that, in sharing the child's attention, responding to them, but then trying to expand it. So repeating what the child says, but then maybe building on it by adding more words in, more vocabulary, so that we can get that two-way conversation, which really helps them to explore their thinking and to develop. So there is a short film clip which is highlighted in the notebook, which is only 5 minutes that I was going to share with you. And it's great just to go back and look at that in action with some early years children. But you can sort of see how useful it is in terms of older children. And in the notebook, I've just pulled through some key points about how it does have that effect for all children within the primary curriculum, between the primary age range. So I shall leave that for you to just reflect on yourselves when you get the opportunity to. So my final 2 slides are just to say you are so powerful in terms of the work that you do. You are often the unsung heroes, but I think that you're all fantastic and you do an absolutely crucial job in our classrooms. And I'm so grateful to those of you who are online who work in our YCAT schools, and I'm absolutely sure that those who are from HART schools do an equally fantastic job in your classrooms. The power that you have is that you build relationships that help the children to feel safe. You have got the ability and you do model calm, consistent routines. You give those prompts, and hopefully today you realize how, you know, just by tweaking language, how much more powerful some of those prompts can be and effective they can be to help change learning habits. And what you can do is notice those small successes that really motivate the children. So you can praise them in the moment, perhaps more than sometimes the teacher gets the ability to do. And we know that when children feel that they can, they really will do. And so, you know, that is the power that you have. And as I say, you really do make a huge contribution to the development of our children. So, you know, I just want to say what a wonderful job you do, and thank you so much. Okay, quick question that has just come through. I'm going to stop sharing there, and I'm going to stop the recording, and I'll just check what that question is. I